To run Visual Studio, if you have it down on your taskbar, which I do, you can just click on it. But if it's not down there and you have installed it, then you can come over to search and you can key in Visual Studio. And you can see I have lots of different Visual Studios here, but the one I want is Visual Studio 2022. So I'm going to click on that and that will launch it. And then what I'm going to do is create a brand new project. Okay, and usually the first time you come in here, it's got all languages here. And so you are going to want to switch that to C#. And then for the project template, we are doing a console app. And then over on the right, you're also going to choose console app and then click on next. For your project name, if you're working on an assignment, it makes sense to, if it's assignment 1, exercise 1, it kind of makes sense to name your project that. I'm going to call this VS Demo. You are going to want to take note of where it is putting the project. And by default, it puts it on your C drive in your users folder under your username. And then you'll see there's a source folder and a repos folder, and that is where your project folder goes. And I would recommend leaving it on the default unless you have a good reason to change it. Another thing that you want to check is the solution file, which we need to use to reopen the project. The solution file should be in the same directory as the project. So if that little check mark is not on, make sure you turn that on. And then for the framework, you want .NET 6. That is the one that has long-term support. And we're going to click Create. Now, sometimes the very first time you create a project, it does take a little bit longer than mine. But once you start creating projects, it does go fairly quick. Just looking at this little interface, it can be a little intimidating, but there's not all of that many areas that we're going to be using. So we're going to be using the program window. Obviously, that's where we're going to key in our code. And the program.cs, that is the name of the file. And if you look over in the Solution Explorer, you'll see that the program.cs file is over there. Okay, and these projects can contain all sorts of different types of files. For what we're doing, console applications, we're just going to be starting out just dealing with the little program.cs file. Now, you'll notice that a lot of the code that you're used to seeing when you go into a C# project isn't there. And that is because Visual Studio actually generates the program class and the main method. So if you're feeling really lazy, you don't have to type them in. Okay, so this will run out of the box if I click the Run button. Let me pull this over here. You see it does run. And it's basically the equivalent of a whole bunch of code. Let me find the code and copy and paste so you can just see that it does indeed generate all of this. Because we're writing to the console, it generates a using system statement. And so it's basically generating all of this code, okay, kind of behind the scenes. So this will end up with the same exact output window that just that one line of code had. Okay, so you can see same results. while you are learning, I do think it's helpful because all the examples that you're going to see have all the code in there. So I do think it's helpful for you guys to key that in. And then, when you become really comfortable and more of an expert at this, maybe you can leave it out. But when you're beginners, it is kind of nice to have it in there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this default code just a little bit to an example that I had for you in the first key point lecture. Okay, so this is just a little example of a program that's going to calculate temperature for us. So I'm going to change the namespace to temp. And a namespace is just kind of like a little container uh, where your code kind of runs. It gives it a unique name. If you're working on a really large project with multiple programmers, it is conceivable that people have named things the same. So having a namespace makes your code unique. So you avoid having problems where you named something the same as another programmer. So let's see, we've got the namespace, we've got our class, which is program. We got our main method. None of that needs to change. And here I'm going to declare a little variable called Fahrenheit. And we're going to set that to 80. And you'll notice that you get a green squiggle in here. And that is because I haven't used Fahrenheit yet. So I've declared it, but I haven't used it. So that is Visual Studio's way of saying, hey, don't forget to use this guy. And we're doing our little conversion code here. And now I'm going to write out that result. And you will notice that it does try to help you in here. And anytime Visual Studio starts displaying kind of dimmed code, if you want to accept that code, you just press tab. So I think this is the most awesome thing ever because probably 9 times out of 10, I like the code that they're trying to put in, so I don't have to type it. I just press tab. This case, I'm going to go ahead and key this in. I'm using a concatenator here. And put in another little concatenator. All right. So I have a Fahrenheit variable I set to 80. I've got Celsius variable that I have the results of that calculation going into that variable. And then I'm writing out the Fahrenheit variable, followed by a little text string, followed by the Celsius variable. Now, because I have a variable followed by a string, followed by another variable, these are different data types. So I had to put the little concatenator in here, the little plus sign, to get these to all come out on the same output line. Okay, I'm going to run this. Okay, and so here you can see the output. And now I'm going to show you what happens if I don't put those in. Because this is another thing I like about Visual Studio. Okay, so you'll notice that we get the red squiggles, the dreaded red squiggles. Those are bad. So those are errors. If I try to run this, it is not going to work. So I'm going to say, no, I don't want to run it. I want to see my errors. Okay, and so here it's saying it's expecting a comma. So a comma can also be used as a concatenator. Okay, so here I can put comma. And let's see what it's trying to do. Trying to convert from int to char. Nope, the comma is not going to work. Let's go back to our plus sign. Well, interesting. It's allowing a comma there. Let me see if I can put that back in. Nope. Huh, let's see if this works. Okay, so it appeared to work, but you'll notice that we didn't get our Celsius amount, so it didn't really work. Let's put our plus sign back in here. Now we'll run it again. And it works. Okay, so let's make another error. What do people typically do? A lot of times people forget those nasty little semicolons. Okay, syntax errors are super common, and you'll notice that we have little red squiggles. So let's try to run this. Okay, there are errors, so we're going to say no, we don't want to run it. And here it's trying to tell us what it wants. Now, you noticed when we removed the plus signs that what it was telling us to do wasn't quite right. Okay. It found the error and it found the location of the error, but its solution wasn't quite right. Here it is saying it's expecting a semicolon. So actually that is a pretty good solution. And if I double click on the error, and this is another thing I like, you'll notice that it moved the cursor to the exact location of the error. So I can put the semicolon in, and then that error goes away. Double click on this one, put my semicolon in, and the error goes away. And now no more red squiggles means I should be able to run this and it should work. Okay, so that is how you create and debug your program. Now I'm going to save it and I'm going to close out of Visual Studio altogether. Now, let's say I want to open that back up. How do I do that? All right, well, we'll start out at the C drive. You have to remember where Visual Studio stored your project. And so it stores it on the C drive under users and your username and source and repos. Okay, now I have lots of stuff out here, good stuff. And so we're going to look for the program we were just in. And if you can't remember the name, you can always sort by the date. Now, the view I'm looking at, if you're not familiar with Windows, this is called Details View. And it's got these headings. And it's kind of awesome because you can sort by the date. Okay, and so then it should put, your most recent stuff up top. And let's see. So I am going to open up my Visual Studio demo here. And then the file that you need to open, a lot of you would probably think it's the program. No, it's the solution folder or the solution file. So you need to double click on this solution file to open your project. What happens if you can't see the 3-character ending? You need to display those endings because every single program puts its own extension on a file. So it's kind of important to be able to see that. So I am using Windows 11. And if I go to View and Show, that is where File Name Extensions is. And there's a check next to it, which means it's turned on. Now, in other versions of Windows, there is, I believe it's a View ribbon, and there's a checkbox that says, show file extensions. I believe that's Windows 10. So you'd want to turn that on. But once you can see your solution folder or solution file, you're going to double click on it. And that is going to launch Visual Studio, and it is going to open up your entire project. So really important that you double click on that solution file to get back into your project. So hopefully you guys will not find using Visual Studio to be difficult. We're really just dealing with the run button and this little program CS interface. Okay? That's pretty much what we're doing in here so far in this course.